you may have heard that a bunch of states are trying to get chaplains into public schools. And whenever they say they want chaplains in schools, we know that's almost always Christian chaplains in public schools. And the question is, well, what's it going to take to stop public school districts from inviting Christian chaplains into the building? We finally got an answer to that this past week in Florida, and it's kind of glorious. All right. So here's the backdrop to this story. Florida, earlier this year, back in April, they passed a law that would allow untrained Christian chaplains to volunteer in public schools, essentially not as substitutes for trained social workers and counselors, but kind of, but to supplement trained social workers and counselors. In Texas, they tried to do this last year, and really it was as a substitute. Like schools could hire chaplains to replace their counselors and some very disturbing stuff. In Florida, they had some caveats to their bill. For example, parents had to be informed about the religious affiliations of any chaplain on campus. They had to give written permission before their kids could see those chaplains. All chaplains had to pass a background check. And all that's well and good. That's the bare minimum you would want to expect, right? But here's the thing. We knew how this would look in practice, because if a school district ever approved that kind of program, because the state said it's okay, what would happen is there would just be a long line of Christian chaplains out the door, just waiting to get the green light to go into the schools. And since anyone can be a chaplain and there's no minimum, there's no barrier for entry here, like what's stopping a pastor from saying, hey, I need all men in my church to stand up. Buddha, 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 you're all chaplains now. Come get your certificate, go to your local school district and sign up. What would stop them from doing it? It's how they handled like COVID exemptions too. You know what I mean? Like, so if they had the blessing of a local church, they'd be good to go. There would be nothing stopping those adults either from using public schools as target practice for conversions. All they need is permission from parents because they're Christians, and they could do whatever it took to lure kids into Jesus. Imagine for a second if a kid who is gay or trans went to their counselor and was like, I need help, I'm struggling right now. Next thing you know, their parents are like, why don't you see a chaplain? And that chaplain listens to the kid and says, you know what you need? Some conversion therapy and a little bit of Jesus, and we'll fix this right up. Like, what's stopping that from happening? That's bad enough when it happens at church. Shouldn't be happening at school. And yet, Ron DeSantis signed this bill into law in April. And so now, where we stand is that the ball is in the court of individual school districts. They now have permission to say we're going to allow chaplains in our school district or we're not. And so that's what the Osceola County School Board was facing this month, because school's starting back up. So they had to decide, are we going to let chaplains in the building or not? And what was amazing is that a couple of weeks ago when the school board met, I saw this headline and I was kind of surprised by it. Osceola County School Board delays vote on school chaplain program amid Satanic temple controversy. And it's like, what is that all about? Basically, what they heard is that the Satanic temple said, cool, you're going to allow chaplains in your schools? We want in. And then the board's like, oh, what? You mean there are non-Christians who want to participate in this? And so they're like, maybe we don't want to vote on this just yet. Let's look into this. Let's make sure everything's okay. And while they were delaying it, the Satanic temple, check this out. They actually shared a tweet this is August 13th, in anticipation of the Osceola County School Board's vote on a school chaplain policy this evening. The Satanic Temple has sent a letter outlining what this could mean for the community. Stay tuned for more. And this is hard to read. I'm going to zoom in here. This is the letter they sent. But look at this. Top paragraph. While we believe that investing in licensed professional counselors would be more beneficial for Osceola County students, we are enthusiastic about the opportunity this policy presents for our ministers of Satan, who are eager to build positive, supportive relationships with students and become an active part of the school community. And then if I scroll down here, the third paragraph, the response from Floridians interested in becoming ministers of Satan and satanic chaplains has been overwhelming. With hundreds of members of the Satanic Temple already in Osceola County, we anticipate a significant increase in satanic clergy members actively participating in the Osceola community in the near future. That's from Rachel Chambliss, the executive director of operations for the Satanic Temple. So that happened, and the board's like, we're going to delay our vote because this is not what we planned, which is great. The problem with that is that their next meeting was 2 weeks later, which is this week. So they were going to have to figure out what to do about all this. And the reason we're talking about Osceola County specifically, and this is kind of interesting, not only do they appear to be the first district in the state that is actively considering this measure, when Ron DeSantis signed this bill into law, he did it in the Osceola County schools. In fact, according to the Tallahassee Democrat, look at what the superintendent said to Ron DeSantis in April. It is an honor that you have chosen our community for today's signing ceremony. Thank you for your leadership to ensure our students receive the supports they need to be successful and for recognizing the role that spiritual guidance can have in enhancing the experience of our students. And there's Ronnie signing the bill at that school district. So, like, it's kind of embarrassing that that school district is now like, there's Satanists who want in. Maybe we should delay the vote here. Now, DeSantis, however, is part of the problem because when he signed this bill, he made a bunch of really stupid comments about it, specifically about the Satanic Temple. This is what he said at the time. We're not playing those games in Florida. He's referring to Satanists wanting in on this. He said, that is not a religion. That is not qualifying to be able to participate in this. Just imagine me with a higher voice and wearing high heels. That's Ron DeSantis for you. But he's saying we're not going to allow Satanists to participate. And later on, the Satanic Temple's co-founder, Lucian Greaves, said, despite DeSantis's contempt for religious liberty, the Constitution guarantees our equal treatment under the law, and DeSantis is not at liberty to amend the Constitution by fiat at whim. He just invited satanic chaplains into public schools, whether he likes it or not. Again, all of this was back in April when DeSantis signed that bill. And Satanists were like, oh, no, buddy, you signed the bill. We're coming. We're going to do this as soon as a district says it's okay for us, says they want chaplains in the building. And that's true. Like, non-Christian groups have every right to participate in the program. The Satanic Temple, by the way, is recognized as a religious group by the IRS. So if school districts allow chaplains in their building, but reject Satanists, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And it's not like Ron DeSantis is going to go out of his way to help any of those school boards, right? When a couple of weeks ago, when that school board delayed the vote, the reason they gave, the board chair, Heather Cahoon, said she wanted to think more about First Amendment concerns, and she was worried about federal litigation that we could receive if we were to approve this as it is today. And the reason she was saying that is because in response to all this, Ron DeSantis' administration released this on August 20th. Florida Department of Education announces model policy for volunteer school chaplains program. They're basically saying, hey, school districts, now that the law says you can have chaplains, here's a policy all of you can use. And basically, the policy is messed up. It's hard for me to show it to you. That's why I'm not showing it to you right now. But that policy appears to exclude certain groups. And the reason I can say that is because it defines chaplain as an individual who is officially authorized by the leadership of a religion under the religion's governing principles to conduct religious exercises, which is a very specific definition. And it also required chaplains to have a graduate degree in counseling or theology. And they had to have 2 years of experience as a chaplain. And this is the model policy. I'm not saying school districts have to do this, but if they adopt that policy, think about who that excludes. Christians have seminaries they can go to. They have chaplains who can actually get experience. But if you're like a non-Christian chaplain, you probably don't have 2 years of experience. You probably didn't go to school for it. It's a lot harder for you to meet these qualifications. And so the model policy that Florida gave to school districts basically shut out religious minorities. Another thing that model policy did is it gave principals the ability to reject volunteers if they felt those individuals went against the pedagogical interests of the school, which basically means principals would have a pocket veto over anyone who came and said, I want to be a chaplain in your district. And you know that some principals are like, I don't want that sort of power. I don't want to be able to say to a Satanist, yeah, you know what? You go against our schools, so we're going to say no to you, because that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Americans United for Separation of Church and State, they released a statement after this model policy came out, and they're like, what the hell is this? Look at the headline on the left. Model policy for Florida public school chaplains is model of unconstitutionality. Look at this in yellow. The model policy would exclude some minority faiths or humanists, for example. Even some Christian traditions like Baptists, Quakers, and non-denominational congregations could be left out. And it requires school principals to determine if someone who applies to be a school chaplain is a member of a state-sanctioned faith. Principals must decide if the chaplain's religion is led by a hierarchy, worships a supernatural entity, and imposes moral duties. Telling principals they need to wade into theology to parse a faith tradition's beliefs about the nature and existence of God, moral codes, and governance structure is not just unfair and unwise, it is unconstitutional. Also, if I may add, principals are busy. Don't add another thing like this onto their plates. So this is the model policy proposed by the state of Florida, by Ron DeSantis' administration. This is the policy the district was considering adopting. And then they were like, you know what? I think we're going to get sued. Why don't we delay this vote for now? And that brings us to this past week when they had their next meeting after delaying that vote. And the school board was like, oh no, we're going to vote on this tonight. But first, let's open the floor up to public comments about all this. And there was nearly an hour of public testimony. And a lot of those speakers were very much against the idea of bringing chaplains into schools. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of these clips because they were really good. Here's a clip from David Williamson, who is a co-founder of the Central Florida Free Thought community. Not a Satanist. He is a humanist. He is an atheist. And let me show you what he said. He actually pointed out that there were 257 religious congregations in Osceola County, and only 14 were not Christian churches. So if the school district adopted this policy, they were effectively shutting out religious minorities. Let me show you a clip of what David said.
If you're reconsidering draft policy 3.81, I'll point out again that Roman numeral 2, letter D, number 3 indicates that no matter what they say, as long as the chaplains believe it to be true, they cannot be accused of proselytizing. Calling kids severely mentally ill or victims of demonic possession, using threats of hell, are permitted by this policy as long as they believe it. I didn't make these things up. People in this room actually believe them. And if you're in the volunteer chaplain corps, that will be protected speech. If you think coaching will prevent that, you should seek legal opinions on what happens when the government attempts to tell clergy members what they can and cannot say. And according to Roman numeral 3, letter E, number 2, those conversations will be confidential and behind closed doors of an office paid for by our tax dollars. The ramifications of this are huge. The students will surely bear the brunt of it. For your clergy volunteer members as well, administrators will have to censor their remarks just to keep the peace. Assuming we even hear what was said in those confidential sessions. All this and more are why people are scared sick about a chaplain program. Not as much for the legal risk you're into, but the real harm that will be done when clergy are permitted to tell students what some of them really think about who they are, who they love, and how they act.
I love that. All of that's right on. And it's not even in your face. It's just saying this is a bad use of our resources. The fact that we lack transparency about this, the harm that could be done to kids if we allow this, it's just dangerous. Here is the other co-founder of the Central Florida Free Thought community, Jocelyn Williamson. She also spoke out against the policy. This one's a little shorter, but I love what she said as well.
If we allow chaplains in our schools, we risk not only repeating, but also increasing this harm by spreading religion throughout the school experience, especially for marginalized students like LGBTQ youth and others who already struggle to be accepted. Please protect our schools as places of inclusion and acceptance for all students by rejecting this proposal. Let's ensure every child can thrive without fear of being judged or excluded. Thank you.
So again, very nice speech. There were so many of these over the course of an hour from people who were not just non-theistic. There were religious people speaking out against this too. But guess who else showed up at this meeting? Lucian Greaves of the Satanic Temple, who had no problem just laying in to the school board. Let me show you a bit of his.
Some of your churches have not had the best records regarding childcare and safety. Maybe your church has had no such problems, but you cannot keep this program contained to your church. You cannot keep this program contained to your religion. Governor Ron DeSantis lied to you from the podium during a press conference after signing the school chaplain bill into law. He declared that Satanists would be disallowed. Such proclamations hold no legal weight and do nothing to overturn the Constitution, which guarantees religious liberty for all. Similarly, your Department of Education has released recommended policy guidelines that attempt to narrow the definition of religion to exclude Satanists. This also holds no legal weight and defies all relevant legal precedent. So the short of it is, you're voting on a policy that is unpopular, divisive, poorly planned, obviously dishonest in its goals, unnecessary, and introduces new risks to children, even if you are allowed to implement it according to your wishes. The reality is you'll have to accommodate religious identities you may not agree with. You will end up with Satanist chaplains. Vote how you will. Good luck, and God bless.
Love that ending. You will end up with Satanist chaplains. Vote how you will. Like, it wasn't just atheists and Satanists, though. There were a lot of community members speaking out against the policy, including Christians who knew pushing their faith on students wasn't the job of the public schools. So at the end of those public comments, it was time for a vote of this 5-member school board, and the board voted 3-2 against bringing chaplains into their schools. They said this is not a good idea, so they turned it down, at least for now. Like, there were just too many legal concerns about adopting the policy that the DeSantis administration released. And they want to get more lawyers on this to make sure that they can approve it in a legal way, and what the ramifications of that might be if they pass it. So for now, though, they shot it down. That is a huge victory for Satanists, secularists, church-state separation advocates, and, people who actually give a damn about children. It was also infuriating, though, for the 2 board members who supported the proposal. One of them was Scott Ramsey, who is a DeSantis appointee to this very board, and the other guy was a guy named John Arguello, who made a statement before the vote where he is trying to explain why they need chaplains, and you could tell he's just out of his mind. Let me show you what he said before the vote, and keep in mind, he knew he was probably going to be on the losing end of this.
Wow. I mean, if that's the way that you fight for the community, I hate to see the way that you fight for your family in need. The adherents to the radical leftism are the other side, by the way, and I wanted to make sure that that's clear. These are ideologies that are fighting against this program. Number 2, if there was a student who came up here asking for, hey, I want to be chemically castrated because I'm a transgender ideologist, the school board members on this dais would pay for the Uber to send that student to go to the clinic. Okay. But here, in this situation, a student comes and they ask for spiritual guidance because they need something that is different than what we're offering, and they want to cut it down or provide some lukewarm voting because they're running for office. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We can gaslight and obfuscate and confuse and deceive, but all those things are very clear to the people who love their children, and that's not what's being protected here today, as you can see. We can be honest, or we can be crazy and mentally ill. You can choose that. You can choose that. But those things don't bother me and they don't scare me, and I'm not going to be intimidated by a bunch of crowds of people who don't care anything about our kids. Because I'm actually a man that will fight for his family and fight for his community, and I don't care what all these crazy people say.
Did you hear when he made that line about, like, I can't believe there's a guy on the school board who says something like, oh yeah, like, if there was a hypothetical student that said, I want to be chemically castrated because I'm a transgender ideologist, the school board members on this dais would pay for the Uber to send that student to go to the clinic. What is he talking about? That's not how anything works. Nothing like that happens ever. And this dude is on the school board. And by the way, you probably are not, because you don't run for that position. But that guy ran for the position and he's there. And then he said later, we have like two options. We can be honest and bring on the chaplains, or we can be crazy and mentally ill. Apparently, that's the other option here. And I don't know if you heard when he said that horrible stuff about trans people, you could hear people in the crowd like gasping, like, what? Shame. So after the vote that this guy lost, he was so mad. Look at what he said to a local news outlet right here. The program is dead. The school board of Osceola County allied itself with the Satanic temple in killing the program. And it's crazy that the majority of the school board here in Osceola County allied itself with the Satanic temple. Listen, I don't work for the Satanic temple. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Satanic temple did not just gain 3 new members from that school board. These people are just like, you know what? If we say yes to chaplains, we're going to have to think through the legality of all this. So maybe we should spend more time doing that. And this guy's like, what? No, I want to make a hasty decision right now. That guy might have also been mad because he just ran for the Florida State Senate and lost in the Republican primary. I don't know. Now, here's the thing. None of this means the proposal is dead for good. A committee is now going to look at the Florida model policy. They're going to make suggestions in order to avoid legal conflict. It is possible they will pass this policy later on, but in some revised way. Other school districts in Florida have to make similar decisions. I don't know what they're going to do. But for now, like the outrage and the backlash and the intrusion, the pleasant intrusion of Satanists and Humanists has had a very real effect. Students in Osceola County schools will not have to defend themselves from predatory Christians who see them as targets because atheists and humanists and Satanists spoke up. Like if they need help right now, if the kids need help, they can rely on trained professionals who take their job seriously and who Florida school districts ought to be hiring more of. Like if the board wanted to help those students, they should hire more of those people. Instead, though, guys like the one I just showed you say they plan to resurrect this motion at the next board meeting, which is on September 10th. So, you know, if you live in the area and you want to speak out against this policy, September 10th is a board meeting. Go there and speak your mind and let them know why this is a bad idea. But for now, excellent. The Satanists and the Humanists got this thing stopped temporarily.